Long before William Harvey discovered blood circulation, it was believed that good health was a result of the balance of certain humors like black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood inside the body. Further, persons with black bile were supposed to have a hot personality and fevers. This hypothesis had to be disregarded when it was realized that even people with black bile and blood circulating inside their body had normal body temperature. Health then came to be regarded as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. However, when our body is infected with a disease, we are no longer healthy. Diseases can be of two types: infectious and non-infectious. As the name suggests, infectious diseases are those that can be transmitted from one person to another. While some infectious diseases, such as the flu, are very common, others like AIDS are fatal. Diseases can be caused by a variety of organisms such as bacteria or fungi. All disease-causing organisms are called pathogens. By that definition, all parasites are pathogens since they harm their host by living off them. Pathogens enter our body through various means, adapt to the environment inside the body, and multiply inside. They then interfere with normal bodily functions, causing either morphological or functional damage. Some common pathogens are bacteria, viruses, helminths, and fungi. The bacteria Salmonella typhi causes typhoid fever in humans. Usually, these bacteria enter the small intestine via contaminated food or water and migrate to other organs via the blood. Did you know that Typhoid Mary is a classic case in medicine, where a professional cook called Mary Mallon caused several typhoid outbreaks through the food she prepared? This happened because Mary Mallon was a healthy typhoid carrier herself. She did not display any common symptoms of typhoid like high fever, weakness, stomach pain, constipation, headache, and loss of appetite. Typhoid fever can be confirmed by a Widal test. In extreme cases, typhoid can cause intestinal perforation and death. Other bacteria like Streptococcus, pneumoniae, and Haemophilus influenzae cause pneumonia that infects the alveoli of the human lungs. As a result of the infection, the air-filled alveoli sacs are filled with fluid, and this causes respiratory problems. Fever, chills, cough, and headache are other symptoms of pneumonia. Sometimes, in severe cases, the lips and fingernails turn grey to blue in color. Pneumonia is so contagious that merely sharing glasses and utensils or inhaling droplets released by an infected person can spread the infection. That merely sharing glasses and utensils or inhaling droplets released by an infected person can spread the infection. Or inhaling droplets released by an infected person can spread the infection. Dysentery, plague, and diphtheria are other diseases caused by bacteria. Viruses are not behind when it comes to causing infectious diseases. Rhinoviruses are responsible for causing the common cold. Did you know that the common cold is one of the most commonly infected human diseases? Unlike pneumonia, it infects only the nose and respiratory passage instead of the lungs. Nasal congestion and discharge, a sore throat, headache, and hoarseness are other symptoms of the common cold, which lasts for about 3 to 7 days. During this time, the disease can spread by inhaling droplets from a cough or sneeze of an infected person, or through contaminated articles of the infected person, such as pens, books, doorknobs, computer keyboards, and other similar objects. Helminths like Ascaris and Wuchereria are also responsible for causing pathogenic diseases in human beings. Ascaris, the common roundworm, is an intestinal parasite that causes ascariasis. It is characterized by internal bleeding, muscular pain, fever, anemia, and blockage of the intestinal passage. Since eggs of the parasite are also excreted along with the feces of human beings, soil, water, and plants are also infected. The infection spreads to a healthy person through contaminated food, vegetables, and fruits. Wuchereria bancrofti is a filarial worm that causes a disease called elephantiasis or filariasis. Filariasis is characterized by chronic inflammation of the organs. The filarial worm occupies the lymphatic system, usually in the lower organs such as the legs, where they continue to live for years. The genital organs are often affected, resulting in gross deformities. Filariasis can be transmitted to healthy people by female mosquito vectors. A vector is an insect or any living carrier, such as female mosquitoes in the case of filariasis, that transmit infectious diseases. Other pathogens such as fungi like Microsporum, Trichophyton, and Epidermophyton cause ringworm that appears as dry, scaly lesions on various parts of the body, such as the skin, nails, and scalp. These lesions also cause intense itching. They thrive in skin folds like the groin or between the toes, as fungi thrive in heat and moisture. Ringworms can be transmitted to healthy individuals by sharing towels, combs, and clothes of an infected person. Therefore, pathogens like bacteria, viruses, and helminths are responsible for causing some common yet extremely infectious diseases. Of the many infectious diseases that exist across the globe, one that afflicts 40% of the world's population is malaria. According to the World Health Organization, or WHO, malaria kills a child every 30 seconds. Worldwide, it is estimated that there are 300 to 500 million clinical cases of malaria a year. Did you know that malaria is caused by a tiny parasitic protozoan called Plasmodium? P. vivax, P. malaria, and P. falciparum are different species of parasitic protozoa that are responsible for different types of malaria. Of these, P. falciparum causes the most serious and fatal type of malaria. Plasmodium enters the human body in its infectious form, known as sporozoites, through the bite of the female Anopheles mosquito. Sporozoites travel through the blood to reach the liver, where they initially multiply via asexual reproduction to form merozoites inside the liver cell. The liver cells burst, and the merozoites are released into the blood. Then, they attack the red blood cells, or RBCs, by multiplying again via asexual reproduction and leading to the rupture of RBCs. The rupture of RBCs releases a toxic substance called hemozoin, which causes chills and high fevers every 3 to 4 days. As the released parasites go on to infect new RBCs, some merozoites develop into sexually differentiated forms such as male and female gametocytes. So, when the female Anopheles mosquito bites an infected person, these male and female gametocytes enter the mosquito's body. They further fertilize and develop inside the mosquito's intestine to form sporozoites. These sporozoites migrate from the intestine to the salivary glands of the mosquitoes, where they are then stored. Later, when these mosquitoes bite healthy individuals, the sporozoites are introduced into the human body, repeating the same chain of events. You may notice that the malarial parasite Plasmodium requires 2 hosts, human beings and mosquitoes, to complete its life cycle. The life cycle includes 2 phases, the asexual one in human beings and the sexual phase in the female Anopheles mosquito. Also, it is Plasmodium that is the cause of the malaria, while the female Anopheles mosquito merely acts as a vector or a transmitting agent. Apart from malaria, amoebiasis or amoebic dysentery is another disease caused by a protozoan called Entamoeba histolytica that lives in the large intestine of human beings. It is characterized by symptoms such as the discharge of blood and mucus in the feces, severe pain in the abdomen, and constipation. Houseflies act as vectors by transmitting the parasite from the feces of the infected person to food and water. It is by consuming such contaminated food and water that the infection is transmitted. Therefore, maintaining both personal and public hygiene is crucial for the prevention and control of several infectious diseases such as the common cold, typhoid, polio, and diphtheria. It is easy to take care of personal hygiene by keeping our body clean and consuming clean food and water. Public hygiene, however, requires proper disposal of waste and excreta, periodic cleaning and disinfection of water bodies like tanks, reservoirs and pools, and hygienic public catering services. Keeping water and food clean is important because most infectious diseases like typhoid, amoebiasis, and ascariasis are spread by vectors that are transmitted through contaminated food and water. Further, it is important to control or eliminate vectors along with their breeding places. No water should be allowed to stagnate around residential areas. Even household coolers should be regularly cleaned. Insecticides or kerosene oil should be sprayed in ditches, drains and swamps. Some fish like gambusia that feed on mosquito larvae should be bred in ponds and lakes. Doors and windows should be provided with a wire mesh to keep mosquitoes outside, and at night, mosquito nets and mosquito repellents should be used. Undertaking such control measures prevents the transmission of diseases such as malaria and filariasis, which are transmitted by mosquito vectors. Even diseases like dengue and chikungunya, which are transmitted by a mosquito vector called Aedes, can be avoided by implementing these control measures. For airborne diseases like pneumonia and the common cold, care must also be taken that contact with infected persons and their belongings are avoided. While some, like smallpox, have been eradicated completely, others, such as polio, diphtheria, pneumonia, and tetanus, can be controlled to a large extent by vaccines. With new emerging developments in biotechnology, several antibiotics and drugs have been discovered that are effectively used in the treatment of infectious diseases. Therefore, though malaria and amoebiasis are caused by protozoans, they are transmitted by vector mosquitoes. However, with careful control measures, vaccination and drugs, these diseases can be dealt with. You may have noted that some people get sick more often than others. When an infectious disease is doing the rounds of your locality, there are some who remain healthy while others take ill too soon. Also, even though our body is attacked every day by several infectious agents, we do not succumb to every agent. Why is that? The answer lies in the immunity of our bodies, which varies from individual to individual. Immunity is the overall ability of a host to fight the disease-causing organisms. Immunity is of two types, innate and acquired. Innate immunity is something we all possess since birth. It is a non-specific kind of defense, which provides different types of barriers to the entry of foreign agents to our body. 4 different types of barriers are provided by innate immunity: physical barriers, physiological barriers, cellular barriers, and cytokine barriers. The skin on our body is the main physical barrier to the entry of microbes. The mucous coatings of the epithelial lining of the respiratory, gastrointestinal, and urogenital tracts inside the body are also physical barriers to microbes as they trap them. Saliva in the mouth, hydrochloric acid inside the stomach, as well as tears in the eyes, act as physiological barriers to microbial invasion. Our body also has certain types of leukocytes or white blood cells or WBCs, such as monocytes, natural killer lymphocytes, and polymorphonuclear leukocytes, also known as PMNL neutrophils, in the blood. Together, they constitute a cellular barrier, along with macrophages in the tissues. They can also destroy microbes. Some virus-infected cells release proteins called interferons that prevent the spread of infection in the body, thereby acting as cytokine barriers in the body. On the other hand, acquired immunity is pathogen-specific. It depends on the body's memory. For example, when a body encounters a bacterium for the first time, it produces a low-intensity response called a primary immune response and produces memory cells. However, when the same bacterium attacks again, the memory cells help to elicit a secondary immune response of high intensity. This response is also known as an anamnestic response. Both primary and secondary immune responses are made possible by two special lymphocytes in our blood, B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes respectively. B lymphocytes produce proteins to fight pathogens, whereas T lymphocytes help B cells to perform this task. The protective proteins produced by B cells are called antibodies. Each antibody molecule has 4 peptide chains, 2 small and 2 longer ones. The 2 small chains are called light chains, while the 2 longer ones are called heavy chains. Therefore, an antibody is represented by H2L2. IgA, IgM, IgE and IgG are some examples of antibodies in our body. Acquired immunity, or the acquired immune response, is primarily of 2 types: a humoral immune response and a cell-mediated immunity, or CMI. It is the humoral immune response that is carried out by antibodies. Since antibodies are found in blood, it is called the humoral immune response. The word humoral refers to blood or any other body fluid. The cell-mediated immune response can be best understood with the example of an organ transplant. When organs like the eye, heart, kidney or liver fail, organ transplant is the only remedy. Thus begins the search for a suitable, healthy donor for transplantation. This is important because grafts or transplants cannot be made from just about any source, as the body will reject those grafts sooner or later. To find a perfect match, tissue matching and blood group matching are conducted before a transplant. This ability of the body to differentiate between self and non-self while rejecting grafts is the cell-mediated immune response. It is an immune response that doesn't involve antibodies, but it involves the activation of macrophages, natural killer cells or NK, antigen-specific cytotoxic T lymphocytes, and the release of various cytokines that fight antigens. Patients who have had organ transplants have to take immune suppressants all their lives to inhibit their body's immune response against the transplant. Then again, based on whether the antibodies are produced inside or outside the body, immunity can be distinguished as active immunity or passive immunity. When the body is exposed to antigens such as living or dead microbes or other proteins, it produces antibodies in response. This type of immunity is called active immunity, which is slow and takes time to reach its full effective response. When microbes gain access to the body during a natural infection, active immunity is induced. Consequently, the underlying principle of any immunization plan is active immunity, where it is induced by deliberately injecting microbes into the body. On the other hand, passive immunity comes into play when ready-made antibodies are delivered directly into the body from external sources to protect it against foreign agents. The antibody that a fetus receives from its mother through the placenta during pregnancy is an example of passive immunity. Likewise, during the initial days of lactation, mother's milk contains a yellowish fluid called colostrum that has copious amounts of the antibody IgA. Therefore, mother's milk also provides passive immunity to babies. Did you know that even though passive immunity provides immediate protection to the body against pathogens, the body doesn't develop any memory of the pathogen? This means that the body is at risk of being attacked by the same pathogen when infected by it later. Therefore, immunity can be innate or acquired. It can also be either active if induced by an infection or a microbial attack, or passive if provided with ready-made antibodies. The immunity of the human body is based on memory. When the body encounters a pathogen for the first time, it reacts with a primary immune response and produces memory cells. When the body is attacked by the same pathogen twice, these memory cells offer an intensified secondary immune response. This memory of the immune system is also used as a principle in the immunization program. A preparation of antigenic proteins of pathogens or an inactive or weakened pathogen is introduced into the body as a vaccine. The antibodies produced in the body against these pathogens are then able to neutralize the pathogens during an actual infection. Vaccines generate memory, which enables B and T cells to recognize the pathogen quickly and produce an army of antibodies in response. Sometimes, when a quick immune response is required, for instance during a tetanus infection where the body is infected with deadly microbes, preformed antibodies are injected into the body. It's the same with snake bites, where patients are injected with preformed antibodies or an antitoxin, which is a preparation of antibodies against the snake venom. This type of immunization, involving preformed antibodies, is called passive immunization. New technologies like recombinant DNA technology have made the large-scale production of antigenic polypeptides of pathogens from yeast or bacteria possible. The hepatitis B vaccine is produced in a similar manner from yeast. In higher vertebrates, like human beings, memory-based acquired immunity is so evolved that they can differentiate foreign organisms such as pathogens from self cells. Most experimental immunology is based on this aspect. In addition, sometimes due to genetic or other unknown reasons, the body attacks itself or self cells. This attack damages the body and is called an autoimmune response. An example of an autoimmune disease is rheumatoid arthritis that affects the joints. Similarly, apart from an autoimmune response, the immune response also comes into play during an allergy. It is interesting to note that some particles in the environment, such as pollen, dust, and mites, cause us to sneeze or wheeze for no apparent reason. This usually happens because people are allergic or sensitive to these particles. This exaggerated immune response to certain antigens in the environment is called an allergy, whereas the substances to which such an immune response is produced are called allergens. Dust, pollen, animal dander, and mites are some common allergens. The antibodies produced against these allergens are usually the IgE type. A runny nose, sneezing, watery eyes, and difficulty breathing are common symptoms of allergic reactions. An allergic reaction is caused by the release of chemicals like histamine and serotonin from mast cells. Therefore, the use of drugs like antihistamine, adrenaline, and steroids quickly reduces the symptoms of an allergy. To determine the exact cause of an allergy, the patient has to either be exposed to or injected with small doses of different allergens. The patient's reaction to each allergen is studied to arrive at a conclusion. Somehow, modern-day lifestyles that border on unhealthy have lowered natural immunity and heightened our sensitivity to various allergens. Moreover, a protected early childhood doesn't prepare the human body for the vagaries of the environment in a metro city. Therefore, even though our environment is continually getting polluted and we are exposed to thousands of antigens every day, it is a combination of the body's immunity and a vaccination program based on immunization principles that help us combat infections and diseases. The human immune system works as an armor against infections and diseases. It helps the body distinguish between non-self cells like bacterial, fungal, and viral pathogens from self cells. The immune system responds to non-self agents and remembers them. It also plays an important role in reacting to allergens, organ transplantation, as well as autoimmune responses. The human immune system consists of lymphoid organs, lymph nodes, and lymph cells called lymphocytes. The lymphoid organs are where lymphocytes originate, mature, and proliferate. Lymphoid organs can be classified as primary lymphoid organs and secondary lymphoid organs. Bone marrow and the thymus are two primary lymphoid organs. Bone marrow is a flexible tissue found in the hollow interior of bones where all blood cells, including lymphocytes, are produced. The thymus, on the other hand, is a lobed organ which is located near the heart and beneath the breastbone. The thymus, which is quite large at birth, shrinks in size with an increase in age. By the time a person reaches puberty, the thymus shrinks considerably. Both bone marrow and the thymus provide the environment for the development and maturation of T lymphocytes. It is in these two organs that immature lymphocytes differentiate into antigen-sensitive lymphocytes. When lymphocytes mature, they move to the secondary lymphoid organs such as the spleen, lymph nodes, tonsils, Peyer's patches in the small intestine, and appendix. It is inside the secondary lymphoid organs that lymphocytes interact with antigens and proliferate to form effector cells. The spleen is a large bean-shaped organ located in the upper left part of the abdomen, protected by the rib cage. It chiefly contains lymphocytes, erythrocytes, and phagocytes. It acts as a large reservoir of blood to be supplied in times of emergencies like hemorrhagic shock or excess loss of blood due to cuts or injuries. It also plays the role of an RBC graveyard by removing old or damaged RBCs from the body. Apart from the lymphoid organs, the human body has clusters of lymph nodes in places such as the neck, underneath the arms, and in the groin. Lymph nodes trap microbes and antigens that enter lymph and tissue fluid. It is these antigens trapped inside the lymph nodes that activate the lymphocytes to produce antibodies, resulting in an immune response. Another lymphoid tissue called mucosal-associated lymphoid tissue, or MALT, is located inside the epithelial lining of major tracts like the respiratory, digestive, and urogenital tracts. The T cells, B cells, and macrophages present in MALT help regulate mucosal immunity. MALT constitutes about 50% of lymphoid tissue inside the body. Therefore, the immune system, which collectively comprises the lymphoid organs, lymph nodes, and tissues, protects the human body from invasion by pathogens and microbes. Since 1981, when AIDS was first discovered, it has now become a pandemic, spreading through human populations around the world. In the last 25 years, it is estimated to have killed 25 million people around the world. AIDS stands for Acquired Immunodeficiency Syndrome. As the name suggests, AIDS is a disease of deficiency in the human immune system, which is acquired during the lifetime of an individual and is not a congenital disease. AIDS is caused by the human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, that belongs to a group of viruses known as retroviruses, which are known to have an envelope enclosing the RNA genome. The HIV infection is usually transmitted through any one of four ways: through sexual contact with an HIV-infected person, transfusion of infected blood, sharing infected needles, and from an infected mother to a child through the placenta. So, other than children born to HIV-infected mothers, people most susceptible to AIDS are drug abusers who use needles too often to take drugs intravenously, individuals who have multiple sexual partners, and patients of diseases such as thalassemia or dialysis who require frequent blood transfusions. It is evident from these examples that AIDS spreads only through body fluids. It is not transmitted by mere touch or physical contact. Therefore, it is advisable that HIV or AIDS-infected people are not isolated from their family and society for their physical and psychological well-being. The incubation period of AIDS, that is, the time lag between infection and appearance of AIDS symptoms, ranges from a couple of months to many years. Once the HIV virus is inside the body, it enters the macrophages, where RNA, the genome of the virus, replicates to form viral DNA. aided by enzyme reverse transcriptase. The viral DNA takes over the host cell's DNA and directs infected cells to produce virus particles. The macrophages produce an army of viruses, therefore acting as an HIV factory. At the same time, HIV enters helper T lymphocytes and produces progeny viruses, which, when released into the blood, attack other helper T lymphocytes in the body of the infected person. The process is repeated till the number of helper T lymphocytes gradually decreases inside the body, resulting in reduced production of antibodies, which affects the immune system. The infected individuals suffer from diarrhea, fever, and weight loss. They become so immune deficient due to the loss of helper T lymphocytes that they are vulnerable to infections caused by bacteria like mycobacterium, viruses, fungi, and even parasites like toxoplasma. Had the HIV virus not infected the body, these infections would have been naturally fought by the body's immune system. The ELISA, or enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay test, is commonly used to diagnose AIDS, whereas antiretroviral drugs are used to treat AIDS. However, drugs can only prolong the life of an AIDS patient. Death is inevitable due to the gradual loss of immunity. Since AIDS has no cure, prevention is the key to keep it at bay. It is important to ensure that blood banks have safe blood and only disposable needles and syringes are used. Efforts must be made to control drug abuse. Sex education must be imparted to the masses so that people indulge only in safe sex. And condoms should be freely distributed and regular checkups made a must among susceptible populations. The WHO has started several initiatives to check the spread of AIDS. In India as well, some NGOs and organizations like NACO, that is, the National AIDS Control Organization, work to create awareness about AIDS so that the disease does not spread due to ignorance. These organizations encourage that HIV infection is not hidden, or it may spread further. Moreover, awareness is also important so that society doesn't shun AIDS patients. Together with the medical fraternity and treatment, society plays an important role in the mental well-being of an AIDS patient. Therefore, though AIDS is caused due to acquired deficiency in immunity due to ignorance and unsafe lifestyle practices, AIDS patients need our help and sympathy rather than our disapproval. The word cancer evokes fear in our minds, and why not? It is a disease that claims more than millions of lives annually in India alone, and has been the subject of a lot of research by scientists and biologists. Scientists have found that cancer is characterized by the uncontrollable growth of the body's cells. In a healthy body, cell growth and differentiation is controlled and regulated. Normal cells display the property of contact inhibition, that is, the inhibition of uncontrolled cell growth due to their being in contact with other cells. In cancer cells, this property of contact inhibition is completely absent. As a result, cancerous cells divide to form abnormal masses of cells called tumors. Tumors are either benign or malignant. Benign tumors cause little damage as they remain confined to their original location and do not spread to other parts of the body. On the other hand, malignant tumors, also known as neoplastic cells, grow very rapidly and damage surrounding normal tissues. They compete with normal cells for vital nutrients, thereby starving them. Cells cast off such malignant tumors, travel to other parts of the body through the blood, and start new tumors elsewhere. This frightening property of malignant tumors is also known as metastasis. The physical, chemical, and biological agents responsible for transforming normal cells into cancerous neoplastic cells are known as carcinogens. Different types of ionizing radiations such as X-rays and non-ionizing radiations such as UV rays and gamma rays damage DNA, causing neoplastic transformation. Similarly, the chemical carcinogen nicotine present in tobacco causes lung cancer. Biological carcinogens can be found in viruses called oncogenic viruses, as they can induce the formation of tumors. They are also called tumor viruses and have genes called viral oncogenes. Even normal cells have certain genes like cellular oncogenes and proto-oncogenes, which, when activated under certain conditions, such as mutations, lead to the oncogenic transformation of cells. This cell transformation, in turn, induces uncontrolled cell division. Due to this scary nature of proliferation of cancerous cells in an infected body, early detection of cancer is essential for its successful treatment. Cancer is detected by using a variety of methods such as a biopsy, histopathology of blood as well as tissue, and bone marrow tests. In a biopsy, a piece of suspected tissue is cut into thin sections, stained, and observed under a microscope by a pathologist. This microscopic examination of tissue to study the manifestation of disease is called histopathology. Bone marrow tests are also conducted to detect increased cell counts in the case of leukemia. Apart from these methods, detection of cancer in internal organs is made possible by techniques such as radiography, that is, the use of X-rays, CT or computed tomography, and MRI, that is, magnetic resonance imaging scans. The difference between CT and MRI is that the former uses X-rays to generate three-dimensional images of the insides of an object, whereas the latter uses strong magnetic fields and non-ionizing radiations to detect the pathological or physiological changes inside tissue. Certain cancers are detected due to antibodies produced by the immune system against cancer-specific antigens. Cancer-specific antigens are protein or other molecules that are unique to cancer cells. These molecules are usually found in the outer plasma membrane, and they are thought to be potential targets for immunotherapy or other types of anti-cancer treatment. Molecular biology proves useful in identifying genes in individuals who are prone to inherit susceptibility to certain cancers. Identification of such genes is useful in preventing cancer, since these individuals can be advised on avoiding specific carcinogens. For example, a person genetically susceptible to lung cancer can be advised to avoid a particular carcinogen like tobacco. Cancer is usually treated by a combination of surgery, radiation therapy, and immunotherapy. In radiation therapy, tumor cells are irradiated lethally while taking care not to damage normal surrounding cells. Sometimes, cancerous cells are killed by chemotherapeutic drugs, which may be specific to particular tumors. Since the human immune system is unable to detect and destroy tumor cells, patients are administered substances like alpha interferon that activate the immune system and help to destroy the tumor. These substances that activate the immune system are called biological response modifiers. In this manner, cancer can be diagnosed and treated with the help of several medical techniques if detected at the early stages. However, it is a killer disease and most often goes undetected by the human immune system. When Army officer Lieutenant Colonel Shaw was in hospital after being injured on the battlefield, he was administered morphine after his surgeries to alleviate the pain. Morphine is an effective sedative and painkiller, especially when administered to patients just after surgery. Similarly, many other plants, fruits, and seeds that have hallucinogenic properties have been used in medicine since ancient times. Some examples are barbiturates, amphetamines, benzodiazepines, and lysergic acid diethylamines, or LSD, that help patients cope with mental illnesses such as insomnia and depression. However, when these same medicines are taken without prescription and in inordinate amounts, they cause physical, physiological, and psychological damage. This phenomenon of overuse of drugs is often referred to as drug abuse. Drugs that are overused are mainly opioids, cannabinoids, and coca-alkaloids, which are generally obtained from flowering plants. Heroin, better known as smack, is an opioid drug. Opioids are drugs that bind to specific receptors in our central nervous system and gastrointestinal tract. Heroin is a white, odorless and bitter crystalline compound that is obtained from the acetylation of morphine, which in turn is extracted from the poppy plant Papaver somniferum. Chemically, therefore, heroin is a diacetyl morphine. It is generally taken as an injection or is snorted. Since it is a depressant, it slows down body function. Cannabinoids are a group of chemicals that bind to cannabinoid receptors, which are found chiefly in the brain. Cannabinoids are naturally obtained during the blossoming of the plant Cannabis sativa. The resin, leaves, and flower tops of this cannabis plant are used in various proportions to produce drugs like marijuana, hashish, charas, and ganja. All these drugs are known for their effects on the cardiovascular system of the body, and they are usually either inhaled or orally ingested. Cannabinoids are also sometimes abused by sportspersons because of their performance-enhancing properties. Coca alkaloids are better known as cocaine, coke, or crack. They are obtained from the coca plant Erythroxylum coca, which is a native plant of South America. They interfere with the transport of a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Cocaine attaches to dopamine transporters, preventing the normal reabsorption process. As dopamine builds in the synapse, it continues to stimulate the receptor, resulting in a feeling of euphoria and increased energy in the cocaine user. Excessive dosage of cocaine, which is usually snorted, also causes hallucinations. Other plants with hallucinogenic properties similar to those produced by cocaine are Atropa belladonna and Datura. Like drugs, tobacco too has chemical substances such as nicotine that cause addiction. Nicotine stimulates the adrenal gland to release adrenaline and noradrenaline hormones, which result in increased heart rate and blood pressure. Smoking tobacco also increases carbon monoxide or CO in the blood, thereby reducing the content of heme-bound oxygen and causing an oxygen deficiency in the body. Smoking also causes lung, throat, and urinary bladder cancers, other than causing coronary heart diseases, bronchitis, emphysema, and gastric ulcers. Tobacco is not only smoked, it is also chewed and used as snuff. Chewing tobacco often results due to the harmful effects of tobacco. The government has ordered that cigarette packs must carry visual statutory warnings that smoking cigarettes is injurious to health. Despite the well-publicized harmful effects of drugs and smoking, both the young and old fall prey to the addiction. Therefore, both drug abusers and smoke addicts require counseling and medical assistance to be cured of their addictions. Every child, during the ages of 12 to 18, undergoes both physical and behavioral changes. This period, between 12 and 18 years, is known as adolescence. During this period, both boys and girls register rapid physical growth accompanied by changes like the growth of body hair and a sexual awakening. The voice starts to break to become deeper in the case of boys. In the wake of all these changes, adolescents are very vulnerable mentally and psychologically during this time. Adolescence is the crucial period that acts as a bridge between childhood and adulthood, when curiosity and the need to experiment and discover themselves is powerful among youngsters. It is this natural curiosity and the need to experiment that takes them to drugs, alcohol, and smoking. Though the first time is usually due to curiosity, later the youngster is tempted to take drugs, drink, or smoke on a regular basis due to their perceived stress-buster effects. This might serve as a way to escape the stress to perform academically, an unsupportive family, or peer pressure. Often, some youngsters are seen advocating drugs, drinks and alcohol as cool, thereby increasing the number of youngsters that are lured to these vices. Television, movies, newspapers, and the internet add to these perceptions by flashing cool images of smoking and drinking in popular public figures such as actors, singers, and sportspersons. Led by all these factors, adolescents frequently begin to use drugs, alcohol, and smoke repeatedly. The temporary feeling of euphoria and calmness that drugs and drinks provide drives youngsters to seek these out even when not needed. And even though this consumption proves self-destructive, this psychological attachment to the effects of drugs and alcohol that leave a temporary feeling of well-being is called addiction. The inherent addictive nature of both alcohol and drugs ensures that with repeated use, the tolerance level of receptors present in the body increases. As a result, these receptors respond only to higher doses of drugs and alcohol, leading to increased intake and addiction. Thus, the drug abuser or alcoholic is drawn into a helpless, vicious circle where they consume drugs or alcohol regularly and can't stop. Without any counseling or support, they become dependent on drugs and alcohol. Dependence is defined by the tendency of the body to display unpleasant withdrawal symptoms if their regular dose of drugs or alcohol is discontinued. Deprived of drugs and alcohol, the addicted youngster displays symptoms such as anxiety, shakiness, nausea, palpitations, and sweating. All these symptoms stop when drug-alcohol use is resumed. At times, these withdrawal symptoms can be severe and life-threatening. This dependence on drugs and alcohol leads the addicted patient to ignore social norms or laws to get sufficient funds to sate their needs. Therefore, adequate moral support and counseling at home and in school is required during adolescence to avoid substance abuse among youngsters. Also, the addicted youngsters can be helped and rehabilitated with professional medical care along with counseling. Both Kurt Cobain and Elvis Presley have something in common other than being popular rock singers of their time. Unfortunately, they both suffered from drug abuse which eventually contributed to their deaths. Excessive use of drugs damages human health and is known to cause coma or death due to respiratory, heart, or cerebral damage. The immediate effects of drug abuse can also result in reckless behavior, vandalism, and sometimes violence. Worse still, when drugs are consumed with alcohol, it often leads to an overdose, which at times results in death. Long-lasting use of drugs and alcohol damages the nervous system and causes cirrhosis in the liver. It also adversely affects the fetus during pregnancy. The identifying symptoms of drug and alcohol abuse are withdrawal, an unnaturally glazed look, disregard for personal hygiene, depression, fatigue, isolation, and rebellious behavior. Sometimes, these behavioral changes are reflected in unhappy relationships with family and friends, as well as changes in sleeping and eating habits. A teenage abuser may register a drop in academic performance or altogether stop going to school or college, lose interest in hobbies, and experience a loss of appetite and weight. Sometimes, in desperation, abusers take to stealing to be able to find money to buy drugs. Such behavior, understandably, is a source of distress to family, friends, and teachers. Drug abusers who take drugs intravenously are also susceptible to fatal diseases such as AIDS and hepatitis B. Both these diseases can be transmitted to a healthy individual due to the sharing of infected needles and syringes. Sportspersons have also been known to misuse drugs to enhance their athletic performance. They take narcotic analgesics, anabolic steroids, diuretics, and certain hormones to increase muscle strength and bulk. Of these, anabolic steroids cause side effects such as aggressiveness, mood swings, and depression. In women, anabolic steroids mimic the effects of male hormones such as testosterone and dihydrotestosterone, causing side effects like excessive growth of facial and body hair, enlargement of the clitoris, deepening of the voice, masculinization, that is, male-like features, and abnormal menstrual cycles. Likewise, in men, they result in reduction in the size of the testicles, decreased sperm production, enlargement of the prostate gland, and acne. In case of chronic use, these effects could be permanent. In adolescence, apart from severe facial and body acne, it can also result in stunted growth due to the permanent closure of growth centers of the long bones. Keeping in mind the severity of the damaging effects of drug abuse, it is better to focus on prevention of drug abuse, especially among adolescents, as they are most vulnerable during this period. Together with the help of vigilant parents, teachers, and even friends, drug and alcohol abuse among adolescents can be checked. Often, peer pressure, high expectations from academic performance, and utter disregard for talents and hobbies lead disgruntled adolescents on a wayward path of drugs, alcohol, or smoking. Therefore, it is important not to compare adolescents with their peers and not to push them too much to perform academically or in sports. It is in fact advantageous to identify their talents and direct their energies to healthy and interesting pursuits like sports, dance, music, yoga, aerobics, reading, and other similar activities. The moral support of both family and friends is important to adolescents in times of crisis and disappointment. It is the time when teenagers should be trained and counseled to handle the problems and stress that life brings. Talking to sympathetic and understanding parents and family members like siblings and friends are very helpful during such times. This not only gives adolescents an opportunity to share their fears, anxieties, and guilt, but also open their minds to possible solutions. In addition, such discussions help parents and family to be aware of the changing needs of the individual. Both parents and teachers should be alert enough to note any change in behavior and habits of the adolescents. In fact, even friends, if they are able to notice the danger signals of drug abuse, should inform teachers or parents about them to help their friends. Lastly, professional psychologists, psychiatrists, and de-addiction and rehabilitation programs can also be sought to help drug abusers. The objective behind such counseling and medical assistance is to diagnose the underlying cause of the abuse and take remedial steps. Therefore, though drug and alcohol abuse can be a fatal malady, it can be prevented by being sensitive to the changing needs of adolescents and by seeking professional counseling and medical expertise when required to deal with the addiction.